Good evening, Black people and all allies fighting for Black liberation, Black prosperity, and Black joy. I'm Charles Blow, and welcome to Prime. We have updates on two significant developments from Florida. In Miami, 12 bodies were found between Monday and today in the horrific condo collapse, bringing the confirmed death toll to 36. More than 100 residents remain missing today, with rescuers detecting no signs of life in the rubble. Also, heavy winds and lightning from now Hurricane Elsa have made search efforts even more difficult. Elsa is now working its way towards the western coast of Florida and is now a hurricane. We'll keep you updated on any developments in the Miami condo collapse and on Elsa as information becomes available. The murder of George Floyd and the ensuing civil unrest produced an unexpected benefit: a newfound interest in and vitality of HBCUs. Rising college costs, student loan crisis, budget cuts had crippled many HBCUs and completely decimated others. Schools like Bennett College and Morris Brown College lost their accreditations, partially due to financial challenges, but have bounced back, regained their accreditations, and established financial solvency. Recently, HBCUs have attracted large sums of cash from corporate and philanthropic America, either as a crisis of conscience or a recognition of racial inequality. Racial tension in American cities and university campuses has led to a spike in HBCU applications and enrollment. Many college advisors credit this movement to Black students' decisions to seek out safe spaces to continue their education and build their networks. HBCU networks are becoming stronger and more visible, with alums like Vice President Kamala Harris, Stacey Abrams, Senator Raphael Warnock, and others rising in political and public exposure. HBCUs also have an influx of notable Black staff like journalists Nicole Hannah-Jones and Ta-Nehisi Coates, NFL greats Deion Sanders and Eddie George, and others lending their talents to the schools in various ways. But here's the question: will America continue to value and support these HBCUs, or will this all wear off? Joining us to discuss is Professor of Women's Studies at Rutgers University, Brittney Cooper, and founder of National Voter Protection Action Fund, Don Calloway. Brittney, Don. So, 5 years ago, some of these schools were out, hat in hand, begging for money, worried. State legislatures kept slashing at their budgets. I went to Grambling. There was talk about merging Grambling with other Louisiana University system just so that it could stay solvent. And now all of a sudden, poof, they are throwing money at these schools. Brittney, what do you make of this turn?
So first of all, I'm a proud, because we had a big win. We've had a big year. And so, we like to tell people about it. But one of the things that I think is important is this is actually a result of the movement for Black Lives. This is a result of the political impetus that the movement for Black Lives has put out in the country really since 2014. And so we've had a couple of rounds of seeing applications spike at Black colleges. In 2015, there was a movement on white campuses around the country, Black students making demands, demanding the names of buildings be changed. And after that point, you saw applications begin to spike at Black colleges. And then again, you saw it last year after the murder of George Floyd. So we need to give credits to movements, because we often yell at young people and say, all y'all are doing is protesting, you're not actually building anything. But what the protests have been accompanied by is an increasing interest in Black institutions of higher learning. We've also been helped, as you noted, by Kamala Harris making it to the vice presidency, by Stacey Abrams, a Spelman alum, procuring the victories down in Georgia. And so folks are beginning to pay attention and say, wait a minute, what are Black colleges doing that are allowing them to produce this level of Black excellence? And so for me, I just think this is America's biggest hidden secret. We've always known, if you were in the Black college family in any way, that we take folks that are overlooked in our communities and we can turn them into superstars within 4 to 5 years.
But Don, there is a bit of an imbalance. I mean, we have to just acknowledge that. There is what some people would consider the Black Ivies, where most of the money is going, right? So it is the Howards, it is the Morehouses, the Spelmans. They're getting most of
It's
the
the Big
cash.
Five: Howard, Morehouse, Spelman, Tuskegee. Yeah.
Right. And so these companies, these philanthropies, they're not doing a lot of work trying to figure out, my dollar would go the longest way if I, went to Alcorn and gave them a whole bunch of money rather than piling on to the school where everybody else is already giving money. They're not doing that. They're just saying, what's the biggest name? Let's write the check and get out of here. Right. So how do we deal with that imbalance? Because it feels like everybody's actuality, they're not. The money's going to the top.
That's a great point. That's a great point, Brother Blow, and it's something that my wife hears me rant about all the time. I am an Alabama A&M University graduate, and we have like a little bit of a chip on our shoulder because, the Oprahs of the world give their $1 million once a year to Howard and Spelman, and we are all kind of like, what about us? And part of it is a Morris Brown shouldn't be insolvent right across the street from a Morehouse and Spelman, which continue to rake in the money. So there is that conundrum there. But I think we have to first recognize that there are public HBCUs, which are largely 1890 land grant institutions, which are supposed to be governmentally funded. And then there are private HBCUs, which are based off of private donations and have subsisted based upon their private endowments for almost 150 years now. Significant distinction. Primarily because HBCUs are located in the South, and they have had to rely upon their foundational funding coming from racist Dixiecrats and now a racist white supremacist Republican Party who, as you mentioned at the top of the show, Brother Blow, continue to threaten to merge our HBCUs, to eliminate them from the face of the earth, despite 150 years of tradition and excellence of putting out not only Black leaders, but the country's leaders. Fun fact, there are more white graduates of Florida A&M University sitting in the United States Congress than there are Black graduates. So it's important to also recognize that the H, historically Black, is important here because a lot of our institutions educate everyone, not just Black institutions. And I gotta say, I'm happy that Howard had a big W today because y'all was down bad last week. Mrs. Huxtable was tripping.
Professor Cooper, I do want to follow up on this issue about endowments, right? There's a push among some the money people, the Black money class, to try to figure out a way to convert these donations into endowments on the same level as some of the white institutions because they don't believe that this money is going to continue to come, right? You're going to get one season of massive donations, and then the winds are going to shift, and nobody's going to give you any more money, and then they'll look back at you and say, well, what did you do with all that cash that came in that season? How do we get the HBCUs to not deal with, some of them have to deal with the immediate issue? There's a hole, in the gymnasium, the auditorium keeps flooding. Don't do that. Instead, put this money into some endowment. How do we get that, change that dynamic for those schools?
I think that we got to stop thinking that the models that work for white institutions work for Black institutions. We have levels of urgency that other folks don't have. We got kids that that are going up. We have problems funding Black faculty at the same level that they would be funded if they work in white institutions. And so while I think that we've got to be talking to HBCUs about endowments, part of that is a question, you think about this case out of Maryland where the 4 Black public colleges there just won a huge federal lawsuit and began their payouts because they were historically underfunded in the state of Maryland, right? So public HBCUs have to begin, demanding that these state institutions actually fund them in the ways that they fund white institutions because that is a public good. And then private institutions, they do have to think about endowments, but we just have so many other things we've got to think about. We got to think about the physical plant. We got to think about the fact that our kids come and they don't have the same levels of coffers in their families to actually fund, their ability to go to school. And let me say too, I really agree with Don that even though I love Howard, I don't just want people to talk about Howard, right? So think about the wonderful work that Ruth Simmons is doing down at Prairie View A&M University. Fund some of these schools in the SWAC. Come on, let's talk about Shaw. Let's talk about FAM. Let's talk about Alcorn. Let's talk about Jackson State, right? Let's talk about Dell State. Let's talk about Philander Smith, right? Wiley College that is right down the street from where I grew up, over in Marshall, Texas. These places have, beautiful traditions of Black excellence. And so my charge to Black folks is pick an HBCU and give. It doesn't have to be Howard. Even if all you got is $25 a month, send it. It makes a difference. And so we want these institutions to be soft places to land for our people. Then we've got to decide that we've got a financial commitment to them too.
Don, a lot of people made a lot about this decision today by Nikole Hannah-Jones and Ta-Nehisi to go to Howard. But what they didn't focus enough on was that a lot of big foundations, Ford and MacArthur and Knight, put in $15 million. The other $5 million come from these unidentified donors, but $15 million of that came from those big foundations, right. And that made it them competitive salary-wise. For a lot of Black talent, you always have to make this choice. Do I go to the school that can pay me what I'm worth, or do I sacrifice and go to a school that will needs me more but can't pay me? And what the foundations basically did today was to make Howard competitive salary-wise. How do we not focus on that and not look over that? These Black professionals need to be paid too. They're just as valuable as anybody else. How do we make sure that they get the salary that they deserve while also supporting the Black school?
Well, there's a lot to unpack here, and there are so many lessons to be learned from the absolute boss move that Sister Professor Nikole Hannah-Jones pulled today. May all the heavens in Wakanda rejoice for what she did. So many lessons, and if you start with them, I think if you read her statement, and again, based upon what you said, it's very clear that she had planned this. She knew that it was time to go to an HBCU where she would be not just tolerated, but celebrated and appreciated, but she put a plan in motion to do so. She reached out to the Ford Foundation. Shout out to the Ford Foundation with African-American leadership. She reached out to the Kellogg Foundation and put the pieces in motion for this to be a reality. This was not a whimsical move. And if you read her statement, it was very clear that this was intentional, and it was something in which she brought many different players of goodwill together to be able to achieve this. So I think that was just one of several lessons. But overall, I think the more important lesson is that we have got to stop trying to fight to force our way into institutions who do not want us there, and who hate us, frankly, and who tolerate us at best. We should go to places where we are celebrated. And so I'm just so happy. My spirit is full and so elated over the move that she made today.
Brittney Cooper, Don Calloway. Sir, I'm going to send you a Grambling sweatshirt, 5 different colors Grambling sweatshirts, so you can make sure you wear them every time you're on my show. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
On another note tonight, thank you. On another note tonight, New York City.